Well, some international response now. United Nations Chief in Global Issues is Charles Radcliffe and joins Newsnight on the line from New York. Mr. Radcliffe, a very good evening to you and welcome. So a new law imposing harsh penalties on gay people in Uganda. Does the United Nations have an official position on this tonight?
Yes, good evening. We certainly do. The United Nations has been pushing hard to try to dissuade the Ugandan authorities from approving this law. It's a disgraceful piece of legislation that's going to violate basic human rights, which Uganda is committed to protecting for all individuals. We think it's not only is it going to affect people's rights, but it's going to institutionalize discrimination, encourage violence, and also impede efforts to roll back HIV. I mean, I don't know how you expect people to go and get tested if by going to a doctor they may end up being turned over to the authorities and put in prison for life.
Now that the bill is law, does the United Nations plan to raise this with the Ugandan government in any way? Are you in a position to do that?
Yes, look, the Ugandan authorities are not going to hear the end of this, and of course not only from other countries that are appalled that Uganda has taken this step, but from the United Nations. At every level in our engagement with the Ugandan authorities, we will be expressing our concerns, but also, of course, Uganda is part of the international community. It's bound by international human rights law. There will be regular reports and evaluations and recommendations. There will be scrutiny, and there will be continued dialogue to try to make sure that this piece of legislation is reviewed and reversed.
Uganda, of course, I imagine, will continue to defend this. They will say that homosexuality is, and I quote, un-African behavior. They will also say that this enables any government to win popular support, and it also has, in many centres, religious support.
They will say that. Of course, countries do have sovereign authority, but that doesn't extend to include taking away people's basic human rights. Those rights are universal. You can say homosexuality is not African behavior. It's human behavior. It's been part of every human society since time immemorial. And so, of course, people are entitled to their own personal views about homosexuality, but it doesn't take away from the fact that every individual has basic rights, and no government, no matter how popular it might be, can take those rights away.
There would be concern, I imagine, that this particular piece of legislation has a ripple effect. This anti-gay bill could also spread beyond Uganda to other parts of the continent.
Yes, and in fact we have seen very regrettable steps backwards taken in other countries too, and particularly Nigeria, which has a quite similar law now on its books. But it's ironic that these countries are taking these steps in the name of asserting their own national sovereignty, when in fact all they're really doing is strengthening and entrenching laws that were imposed on these countries by the British in the 19th century. These laws reflect nothing but Victorian British values. That's really what this is.
Mr. Radcliffe, to what extent do you think this particular move is now going to alienate Western donor support?
I don't know, and of course that's up to them, but I mean the United Nations is concerned that donors might go down the path of withdrawing aid in response to this piece of legislation. I can understand why people are horrified and angry that the Ugandan authorities are treating LGBT people in this way, but withdrawing aid and punishing a whole country because of this is likely to be counterproductive. You end up punishing people who are the most marginalized, the most vulnerable, and of course you also risk creating a backlash against LGBT people, which is exactly the kind of thing you want to avoid.
Thank you very much. Live from New York, the views there of Charles Radcliffe from the United Nations.
Know more. ENCA.com